Today it's April 22nd, the year 2006, in the year of our Lord, and we're going to be talking to Ikey Lou, formerly Ikey Tarleton. So Ikey, as you know, I've taken a lot of pictures out of your albums, but I need to tie it together a little bit. When were you born?
Born September 2nd, 1937. Labor Day.
Born on Labor Day in 1937. And talk to me a little bit about growing up. What do you remember? Some of the things you remember.
Well, historically, my father was with the Carolina Power Light Company, and as such, he had a job through the Depression years. 1937 was in the middle of the Depression. They built a brick home in 1935. I remember very little of the house, although I do remember my kitty coop. This was basically a baby crib with screen wire, so the kid couldn't get out. Unlike some of the ones today, they're made with wood and their heads get stuck in it. This was not the case then, but you could be completely closed in. In 1940, approximately 1942, my father, Isaiah Evans Tarleton, early years referred to as Buck, and in more recent years as Ike, lost the house in a gambling game, and we ended up living under the bridge for a year. Another year they moved the company moved him to another town, and subsequently my parents were separated after I was in the first grade.
So you lived under the bridge. Can we call that homeless?
Well, it wasn't exactly. It was a 35-foot trailer, and it was on some property owned by the power company. The bridge there in Sumter, South Carolina goes over the railroad tracks, so you're at the railroad tracks. There was a big smokestack, I remember that. And I went to the Catholic kindergarten. So my life was still pretty well normal, I guess, as normal as a lot of kids are. Somehow my mother got the monies together. Now, Catholic kindergarten was interesting. We had a next door neighbor there in Sumter, Dottie, and her family was Catholic. We were not. We were Methodist by background. And a few days into Catholic kindergarten, my mother found me in the backyard kneeling down. She inquired into what I was doing, and I was saying my prayers to the angels. Well, she made a visit to the good sisters and allowed us how I shouldn't be going to Vespers and getting the religious part of the training, but rather the practical education that was involved, and that's what happened. I remember once one of the nuns, I inquired of her. I was always an inquisitive and somewhat precocious kid at that time, I guess. I asked her if her clothing was black all the way underneath, and she took me into the convent and raised her skirts and showed me her gray bloomers and her gray petticoats, and so everything was not black.
Now, you went on to high school. Where'd you go to high school?
Yeah, we moved a number of times. That first move when they split was we moved in with your family in Charleston. We arrived in the evening hours. Billy put us to bed, as I remember, and the next morning we got up and my mother had stripped every closet. Every closet in the house had stuff laying out of it on the floor. She was searching for the dirty diapers, which she thought she could smell. It wasn't anything to do with dirty diapers. It had to do with the pulp mill. As you remember, they have somewhat of a similar smell, and she subsequently found out that on certain days that odor would be around her. But she had torn Billy's house completely apart, thinking of her as a bad housekeeper. She never thought any of us girls were any good anyhow. So.
Back up a little bit. You say Billy, you had two sisters.
Billy Bernice, your mama.
Yeah, my mother, and then you had
Jimmy Louise, right?
Okay.
People, when they hear my name, Ikey, they say, "Oh, that's a cute name. Where'd it come from?" I said, "It was named for my father." But I have sisters, Billy and Jimmy. Oh dear.
Why didn't they name you Bucky?
Because he was. Oh, now Buck, I only have to assume from that. Rex, Ike was in the First World War. He was a foot soldier in the 113th Field Artillery Battalion there from North Carolina, and he never made it past Buck Private. So I'm sure that that was a very negative. Some subsequent time, Ike became the name that they called him, and Isaiah was not a name that we walked around calling people in those days, and so Ike became his nickname. Billy was 16 years older than me, Jimmy 12, and I came along as a mistake, and there wasn't going to be any more. So,
Well, you think you were one of those children conceived to heal a family?
I just think I was one of those. Every time he got next to it, she got pregnant. That year worked in an asbestos factory. I went to a school second shift, and I can remember.
What year was this?
Second. This will be. This is war years. This is 1940, 43.
43. Okay.
43, 44. I can remember being disciplined many times in the classroom with my holding out my hand and being popped with a ruler, or standing in by the blackboard with a circle and my nose pointing at it. Those are my only real memories of the second grade. They were very negative. My mother then relocated back to Sumter, South Carolina. That was in Charleston, by the way. Relocated back to Sumter. The first year she did live in duty with an elderly, paralyzed woman, and she helped turn her at night and in the daytime and feed her and potty her and whatever. But it was a place she could keep a single mom could keep a kid with her. There was a room in the back. She then went on to work at the hospital for about a year in the dietetics, making things. She worked in the cafeteria, making salads. She worked in a little tiny dry goods store. Worked her way up to manager there, and then moved on to, in about the fourth year that we were in Sumter, moved on to be in Miss Denmark's smart shop. Miss Denmark was a white Russian Jew, the only Jewish family in town. As you know, in the South, that was a very common occurrence. The son owned the theater, she owned the smart shop. She had been a Powers model in her earlier years, and would take 4 trips a year to New York to buy garments for her ladies.
Okay.
Come back.
We're moving. At this point, we're moving on to other people's stories and not Ikey's story. Does Ikey, Ikey, did you get all the love and affection you felt you needed, deserved?
Of course not, but I went looking for it. I had many second mothers and fathers along the way.
Yeah, that's moving us along. How about high school? Tell us a story or two about high school.
Well, we moved to...
Did you fit right in? Did you feel you were...
No. From... I was, today, in today's world, I would be probably referred to as a person on a dry cleaning laundry van. Worked as a dime store clerk, got myself as a floor walker. Before I was 16, I was watching the mature people make change in the dime store.
Better a floor walker than a street walker, they used to tell me.
That's true. Every holiday, I do not ever remember a holiday from the time I was 14 or summer, until I went to work for IBM. I took a month off after I finished college. The first time I'd ever taken any time off at all. Sometimes 2 and 3 jobs. I had babysitting jobs at night, walk the dog kind of things in the afternoons, and work whenever the store wanted me to work. 50 cents an hour was the wages at the dime store.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about this anonymous benefactor that paid your way through college.
I went 3 years to high school in Wadesboro. In those days, you had to have 16 units to graduate, 4 of English, 4 of math, 3 of math, and whatever. And I had taken extra credits my first 3 years, so I had 15 units. I only liked senior English and being able to graduate high school. Decided to apply to college and got into the Women's College of the University of North Carolina, which is now UNC Greensboro. The room, board, tuition, laundry, $644 a year. 2,400 girls, tremendously competitive environment. I barely survived, but got through there. Had to quit school a year to get money to go back. I worked at Duke University for a year in their data processing department. The thing I'm worried about the next generation is nobody seems to care for anybody else. It's still the me generation coming along. It's thinking that they're entitled rather than having to work for something. Yep, I'm worried, I would say. But once again, I have no control since I don't have any kids. I happened to have gotten married the first time 2 months after the pill came on the market. It was one of the first of the generation that was allowed to choose whether I wanted kids or not. I've always borrowed them for the weekend and given them back, but I never wanted any of my own. So I don't have very much control about what's out there, but it does worry me.
And what would you do starting today? What are you planning on doing to make things different in that regard?
Yeah, basically when I meet or greet someone who's in the younger category, I always offer them a few words of advice which they can take or not. And I give it in that same spirit. Because they always ask me how I made it. I will never know who paid for part of that tuition. Any place it was that seemed to follow me. So part of it was paid. But in the meantime, I also worked 20, 30 hours a week at the college, outside, whatever I happened to do, Christmas and holidays, wherever I could find a job. In my senior year, I was counting lab instructor. Today that would be referred to as a tutor for the beginning accounting students. And the phone rang in Professor Reese's office, as the written story tells you. It was the branch manager from IBM Greensboro. He was going to invite 100 CPAs to the branch office on a Saturday morning in October to see a Turing data processing machine. And he kept talking about this data processing machine. Finally I said, well, Mr. Axel, if you can just tell me which machine it is, I'll be glad to describe it to Professor Reese. Well, he inquired in terms of how I knew anything about equipment, invited me, so on one Saturday morning in October, 100 CPAs in their males and myself showed up for a demonstration of the 305 RAMAC, IBM's first random access machine. And I had a preliminary interview. They did an interview at my school, which was now Elon College. And they said if
what they used to call Women's College of the University of North Carolina became Elon?
It became UNC Greensboro.
Yes, and then
I transferred to...
What became Elon?
I transferred to Elon, which had been there since 1895. Yes, it's an old school, a local school, congregational Christian and religious affiliations, as many private schools in those days were. And I guess you can say that I had grown up a bit, and I kind of blossomed there. So, but in any event, you would still look back, and I would still probably in today's vernacular be referred to as a geek on the football cheerleading circuit or the lots of money thing. But the Elon Players was named to Who's Who among students at American universities and college. Was into dramatics, an honorary dramatics fraternity, Alpha Psi Omega. Did well.
Tell me about how you came to get married.
First time?
Mm-hmm.
First time I was married to John David Rogers Jr. Met him in New York. He was with IBM. And I was testing on one of the early computers. And he was assigned as the data center representative to make sure that myself and my customer had everything we needed to do the test. We came in for a week or 10 days. Everything that you could bring along to test with, unlike today's environment. So anyhow, I actually first couple of trips up dated one of the other guys in the data center. And John says he inquired when I was coming the next time, when the guy was coming to ask me out, and he said no. So John asked me out. We met there in the fall or summer of excuse me, 1961, and were married in end of February of 1962. Took our honeymoon trip to California and never went back.
Okay, how long were y'all married?
We were married 12 years.
And John's still alive?
Yep, he's still alive. He lived in our house that we bought in Northern California. We bought it in 1965 for $28,500. He sold it in, I think it was 2002 for $900,000. Singles party, met Norman. He invited me out the next day, and we were together ever since. We were married in, excuse me, June of 1974, and he passed away in October of 1993. Norman was 17 years older than me.
And so y'all were together a total of 19
years old.
Okay. Now, these are, the next few questions a little tough, but what are you most proud of in your life? Name a couple things that you particularly feel good about.
I tell people that I began teaching people to program computers in 1959 when the students came to class not knowing what the word meant. And that's always been kind of fun for me. I could keep a step ahead. I would always volunteer to do the new stuff, and that's what I enjoy. When I retired in 1984, after several generations of high tech, I've never looked back. Today I use a computer for a nice word processor and an occasional piece of email.
What are you ashamed of in your life? Are you willing to be truthful on this interview?
Never really thought about it. Don't even know.
Okay.
I've always lived a simple life.
Okay, Norman's been gone how long?
Norman passed away in '93. This is 2006. In October it will be 13 years.
Where do you see your life going now?
I'm very seriously considering moving into another level of care. We have today's environment. We have lots of places for single folks. I have single folks. Virtually all my family's dying off on me. Either that or they're as old and just about as incapable as I am. So.
What do you think life care means to
Well,
you?
life care means I can be as independent as long as I can. When I need assisted living, that will occur. And when I need to be hospitalized, will occur on site.
Tell me a couple things you might do over in your life.
Well, given that if I had had the money, I would have done more traveling earlier in my life. I've been on 20 cruises, about 8 of them before Norman passed away and 12 since he passed away. And I really enjoy traveling of all kinds. We went to Europe, we cruised around South America, we went up and down the Mississippi River and the Columbia River and Alaska. We had a good time. And I have continued having a good time that way. It's extremely difficult to find others who are as adventuresome as myself in terms of that kind of travel, so I tend to go solo.
What else would you do over? It's not meant as a trick question. It's
No,
just,
I understand.
If you had, if you had free hand to do things over, just wondering what you might do over. Do you have regrets, in other words?
No.
Do you have
No.
serious regrets?
Don't have any serious regrets. Don't look back on anything and say it was wrong. But I've always been a happy camper. I mean, if something goes wrong, it's we discuss it, but it's gone tomorrow. Don't look back on the bad things at all.
Tell me some of the things you do the same.
certainly landing that job with IBM and sticking to it for 25 years was probably the smartest thing I ever did. The second one was from the day I got my first paycheck from IBM. 10% went aside. That's how I was able to buy Norman's wife out of her half of the ranch. And been a nest egg for me making money ever since. Yep, I did good.
Ranch has been important to you.
I always consider myself to be a carekeeper for the ranch. When Norman was alive, his motivation was just in keeping his head above water with the ranch. But any improvements that have been made here, basically I've done them.
Okay, you see, most of your relatives have died off on you?
Yeah.
Name some of them.
Well, all of my mother's 9 brothers and sisters are gone. The girls all lived to be over 90, and the brothers lived to be over 80, except one who died with asbestosis. On my father's side of the family, I knew his half-sister, Ethel, who was the oldest one, and his youngest sister, and just his youngest sister. And I knew in the earlier days his 2 brothers, but I wouldn't recognize them if I saw them today, nor any of their children. The brother Walter, which was the baby brother, was...
Now we're approaching the final question. What do you want people to say about you? What would you like to think people would say about you 50 years from now?
Well, I guess the only people who will remember me 50 years from now are those who are the recipients of the scholarships that I'm setting up. One has already been endowed as a single scholarship, but has the funds on an annuity to multiply it. And the second one, I'm challenging my classmates as our 50th anniversary of our 50th reunion for Elon comes up to endow an additional scholarship there. So that's what I'm working on now. Help the future ones come along.
Okay. Do you have any final words?
Glad you guys could come to the ranch finally. I mean, for basically first kin folks to come from the east. You didn't even wear your straw hat.
No, I didn't. My wife won't let me.
Won't let you wear a straw hat.
Is that it? You got nothing else to say?
No, no more words of wisdom.
That's it. This interview is over.
Ikey's had a lot of people in her life, mainly the West Coast. She left here about 62 and left the East Coast in 62, and so now we're going to go through a few people in her past. Ikey married Norman Little in 74, and then she and he had a ranch in, Watsonville. It's now called Moss Landing, near Santa Cruz. Ikey's stepson, Alan, was very close to Ikey. He retired from the Army and then took up a kind of a look after people on the highway sort of thing. Alan became rather famous locally for helping the stranded travelers. These are just some of the medals he won during his military tours. This is Ikey with Norman, Dallas, and Jimmy, and another family member. I don't know which one. You'll have to check for the closest resemblance. This is Ikey's father, who you'll hear her discussing in another part of this film. Ike died in 59. He was only about 62 or 3, and he had worked all his life for the Carolina Power and Light Company. I believe on the right-hand side of this picture is Rose Tarleton, Ikey's mother. This is Vicky, Dallas, and Jimmy. Jimmy was Ikey's sister. This is Ikey's niece. Vicky never left the East Coast. She's now living high up in the mountains of Asheville, helping develop land. The little fellow on the left is Chris, Vicky's daughter, which would be Ikey's grand nephew. This is Ikey in a school photo. This appears to be Billy, Ikey's sister, it being held by her grandfather, Kiker, we think. Dallas Poole when he first came out of the Navy. Ikey in what could be a college photo, I'm not sure about that. I'd hoped to get a picture of Ikey's first husband, whose name was Rogers, but she said this is actually just a bow she had early on. As Ikey says, she and Norman liked to dress up in costume, so they'd go on cruises, and if the photographer was ready, they were ready. They'd go get a costume of some sort on. Norman grew a beard at one point for their Hobo Days Airstream Festival, where they pretended to be vagabonds. Here are a few aerial views of the ranch, and you can see how close it is to the ocean. This and the next picture shows you Ikey's grandchildren, how they progressed, moved along. Norman loved to work out in the iron garden. There'll be a couple more pictures here that'll give you a better view of the iron garden. Here we have Alan Little and his mother, Mary. Should be pointed out that Mary and Ikey are friends. There's never been a hostility between them. Here we have a wonderful view of the iron garden. Norman loved to go to auctions and buy things. He always had intentions of putting them together and making this, that, and the other thing. He was a farmer in his heart. And, well, as you can see, a lot of stuff accumulated over the years. So you think this is an Airstream convention? Nope. Those Airstreams all belong to Norman and Ikey. They had a mess of them. This is a picture of Ikey's sister Jimmy and her brother-in-law Dallas, who probably in many ways served more as a father to Ikey. He did to me too. He tried to fill that figure. In her later years, Ikey's been working hard to set up some scholarships for young women who have no means to go to college, and she wants this to serve as her legacy. In 2006, Paulette and I decided to go out west to see Ikey. So she met us in Las Vegas, and we went off a ripping and a roaring. These are just random pictures. There's no rhyme or reason, but this is the deck on Ikey's house there at the Little Ranch. Ikey told me she likes to get in, still likes to get in a little bit of RVing, so she does keep a camper. This was in Death Valley. Here the girls are waiting on a plane to take them out to fly over the Grand Canyon. San Francisco was just a little misty from up on Twin Peaks, but it'll be clear next time we go back.